Hey, it's Amy. Welcome back to my cave. It has been a long time since I've been on here. I actually can't remember what I used to do back when I updated regularly. I have not uploaded in so long that I was forced to update all of my software before I was allowed to even start recording. And I do everything on a whim. And it made me almost walk off because I'm so lazy and impatient. But I was worried that I was going to forget all the books that I read recently if I don't film this now. So that's why I am here. The reason I stayed away is because I was addicted to Korean variety shows, so I wasn't really reading anything, so what was there to talk about, right? And for the one book I read, I should have talked about it earlier, but I didn't because, like I said, I was, again, addicted to variety shows, so I was just watching those, and I have no regrets. I had a lot of fun doing it, but now I am back. As of about, I think, a week and a half ago, I started reading again, so now I have things to talk about. It is currently the eve of the Olympic Marathon. Not Marathon, Readathon. on the Shelf Space Discord, and it's already too late to sign up to be part of the teams, but if you want to follow along with me in the month of June as I try to fill out these 16 prompts, I'm going to go ahead and paste them in the description box below so you can see them. There are prompts for 16 different gods and goddesses. One example I'm going to give is, this is not a TBR video because I don't do TBRs. I never follow them. There's no point in me making one, but this book right here, The Black Host, I am going to be reading this one for sure because I'm buddy reading it with Gregory LaPerche, and I have to finish because we're going to do a live show and I won't have anything to talk about if I don't finish it. And plus it fills one of the prompts, which is the Poseidon prompt for water, which is, I think it's like the book has to be about water, involve water in a significant way, something like that. So it's, look, ships, water, and this is going to work. So I don't really know exactly what the book is going to be about, and this is why I don't do TBRs, because I can talk all I want about what I think a book is going to be about, but then it's going to end up being completely different. But in the month of April, I read one book, only one book, and that book was Firekeepers Daughter. This is a YA mystery thriller about this young woman, Dionysus Fontaine, who is a half Ojibwe, half non-native college student. That's right, yes, at the very beginning she's just graduated from high school and she was going to go off and go to medical school and play hockey for, I think, Michigan State. They are from a small town on the border of Michigan and Canada. So most of the residents of this town are part of the Ojibwe tribe, they're enrolled. Dionysus herself is not enrolled because I think according to their laws, her father is not listed in her birth certificate because her father and mother were not actually in a relationship. Her mother's side of the family, which is non-native, I think European roots, very wealthy and influential. They did not want her father, who I guess they considered not good enough to be listed on her birth certificate. So because of that, they basically deprived her of being able to enroll as a tribal member. And it's actually a plot point in the book. Anyways, where was I going with this? Oh, that's right. She has decided to attend college at the local university instead with her best friend because her uncle on her mom's side of the family has just passed away from presumably an overdose. Her mother insists that he did not overdose, and she's the only one who really believes in him. Dionysus, even though she was really close to her uncle, she also thinks that he probably overdosed because all signs kind of pointed towards that, even though it was kind of one of those shady deaths. No one's really sure exactly what happened or why, but that's just, like I said, this is just it's a very common way for people to go in this area. So people just accepted it for what it seemed like and just moved on. But her mother is very delicate, so she's grieving. And plus, the mother's mom, so her grandmother, is also, I think, suffering from dementia or something like that. She's basically fading away. So she's in a nursing home and she's no longer all there, and her mother is just very upset about it. So Dionysus, who was raised pretty much solely by her mother, decides that she's going to stay close by just to support her mom, and also just to be near the others in her community, her best friend Lily, her brother Levi, who is a senior in high school and the captain of the hockey team, and her aunt on her dad's side, who is a big part of her life, and just an overall very fierce, kick-ass woman, an important member of the community as well. So in the first few chapters, Dionysus is just kind of coming to terms with the fact that she is not going to be living out the dream that she expected to be living out, and she's trying to just figure out how things are going to go now that she's attending school close by, and her relatives are kind of disappointed about that, and other relatives are relieved that she is going to be staying, and so on and so forth. There's just so many mixed emotions, and there's this hot new guy that suddenly appears. His name is Jamie. He is very good at hockey. Hockey is a very big deal in this town. Like, Dionysus is from a hockey family. She herself played hockey. Her father was a hockey star in his youth. Her brother Levi, like I said, captains the hockey team. And Jamie is good enough to join Levi's team. And so he quickly becomes a part of their lives. But despite the fact that he seems like the perfect boy and all that, there's just, like, because this is a mystery thriller, everybody has something to hide, and Donna starts to wonder, like, what is it about Jamie that just feels kind of off? And then we learn more and more about that as the book continues. Like, Donna gets sucked into this investigation with the FBI. This is not a spoiler, it's in the synopsis on Goodreads. And she decides that she is determined to help get rid of the corruption and some of the other problems that are plaguing her community, such as involvement with drugs and the drug trade and so on and so forth. And she does this with the help of her just vast knowledge of chemistry. Like, Donis is so smart. Like, she's somebody that thinks in a very logical and like scientific minded way. You'll see it as you read the book. She basically thinks everything out, like plans everything out in a way, like, you know, step by step, like the scientific process. And she takes the evidence and analyzes it. And even when all this shit happens, like to her and like her loved ones, the people in the community around her, she's still able to keep an eye on the goal, which I find very admirable. Yeah, there was so much I wanted to say about this book, but it's been a while since I read it, so now I'm like, what did I want to say? But overall, it's a really good book. Like, I think everybody should read it. I learned so much from reading this book, just about like the Ojibwe culture, the community, the history, the problems they're still facing to this day, because this book came out this year, so this is like a very contemporary problem. It's not something that happened in the past or anything like that. It's a very dark book. There are sections of it that are super, super sad, but I would say overall it is not completely depressing. It is a hopeful book. There's a lot of hope for being able to rebuild, heal, and make progress together as a community, because that's super important to Donis and everyone else in her town, like both the native and the non-native members, like from the children all the way up to like the elders. I can go on and on all day about this book. That's why I should have done a whole entire video just for this book, but you know, I didn't do it. So now I have to stop and move on to the next one. And the next book that I read is The Last House on Needless Street by Katrina Ward, and this one is an arc that I got on NetGalley. I actually found out about it after I was listening to this podcast episode of Breaking the Glass Slipper. They were interviewing Katrina Ward about this book and I think the episode is called Making the Ordinary Monstrous. I wasn't really sure what exactly this book was going to be about just from listening to that. I knew it was a horror novel, a horror thriller specifically. At the very beginning when you start out, you think it's going to be just like, you know, Criminal Minds episode or something. The setup is very similar. There's this family on the beach and like the little sister goes missing. They find like a sandal. There's a guy in like the neighborhood nearby who basically lives by himself, and everyone like thinks he's a bit odd, and all signs point to the fact that he could be involved somehow. And the way that the author narrates the story, like she uses different perspectives, and at first this bothered me. Like, there's even a cat's perspective, and I went, God, even the cat gets to narrate? And there was a point where like mental illness was brought in, and I was so sure that it was going to be depicted in a problematic fashion, just because as you're reading, you might have the same thought. Like, I think the thought will cross everyone's mind at some point where you're just like, where is this going? Is this going in this like negative direction that I think it is? And then it just kind of surprised me because it didn't do anything that I thought it would, and the whole story is not what it seemed like initially at all. It's the same cast and everything, but there's just more to it than meets the eye. So I don't know how to explain this story without spoiling absolutely everything, but it is dark. It could be triggering. I do think though that if you are especially if you are into thrillers and you want a depiction of mental illness that is more nuanced, more well researched, and more sympathetic, I would recommend checking this book out, just because it is in a way like a serial killer story, but it is also super unique. It kind of forces you to re-examine a marginalized community that most of us never really think about. So yeah, I am glad I listened to that podcast episode and ended up picking up this book. The next book on my list is Malice by John Gwynne, and everybody and their mother has read this book and enjoyed it, so I expected to love it. I don't know, the cover and everything about it, just like the things that people were saying, it seemed like it was going to be like a kind of like classic style fantasy novel that I was going to enjoy immensely. And sadly, the reality of it was I just couldn't click with it. Like, I think, like, I can see how other people might like it, and I think there are enough people who like it from different backgrounds that I can say that it's not just something that, like, a certain type of audience likes exactly, but I don't know, it just did not work for me. And the reason why is because I just could not really connect with any of the characters, and I feel like many of the scenes that he wrote that were meant to be emotional did not feel that way to me. It's like the buildup or something was all wrong. Like, something sad will happen to, example, this guy's wife, and he's like, I am so angry, like, I have been wronged, and I know I'm supposed to be feeling a bit of sympathy for him, but I don't really feel anything. The horrible things happen to good people, and we're supposed to be feeling bad for them and for the people that their deaths and everything affect, but I just didn't feel anything. You know the SNL character Chad? I was basically having a Chad reaction to everything. So every time somebody was like, my wife died and it was your fault, okay, I basically just didn't really feel anything beyond that. This happened and this person's sad about it, okay, and I'll just take your word for it. Like, I didn't feel anything myself, and just, okay, I didn't really even tell you what the book was about. So it's just like, you know, these people are fighting over some magical relic. It's just typical fantasy novel struggles where, like, all these different kings are fighting for power, kind of, because, like, I mean, there's this, like, king that rules over all of them, and some of the other kings and queens are grumbling about it just because the only reason they are under this guy's rules because of some long ago pact their ancestors made or something like that. And there is this prophecy that's supposed to be coming true because there's all these signs for it. Oh my god, the rocks are bleeding, the end of the world is coming, we're gonna have to side with, I think the guy's, he's called the Bright Star. They're like, the bright star is going to rise and we all have to side with him in order to defeat this dark lord that is returning. You know, the typical fantasy stakes where you're just like, okay, well, one of these people that's narrating, because there are a lot of narrators, one of these narrators is going to be the chosen one. And like, who is it? Guess who it is? Like, I basically predicted exactly what would happen in this book before it happened. I was like, this guy, even though kind of boring and typical, is going to be the chosen one, and that guy probably going to be the villain, and so on and so forth. Like, you just, like, you can tell exactly which character is going to play which role in this story. At least I could. And it bothered me. I don't need to not know anything in a book, but I like to be able to be stumped or thrown off at, like, some part in the story. Like with Firekeepers Daughter, and like with Last House on Needless Street, certain things happened where I went, oh my freaking god, that took me completely by surprise, and I loved it. With this one, it just, I was meh about it. I was Chad about it, and that was it. There were several times in the novel that I wish that he had picked just a different narrator to narrate certain scenes, because all these characters are in different areas of the kingdom, and you're like, okay, this is what's happening here, meanwhile this is happening here, blah blah blah. And the narrators that he chose just were very boring. Like, I think, like, I'm okay with oh my god, Dan Corbin, like, I'm okay with him. He's your typical teenage fantasy narrator, but I was okay with him. Like, I'm like, alright, whatever, I'll give you a pass. His sister was quite interesting, but she was like a minor character. On the other side, there were other characters who are witnessing certain power struggles play out. But the characters, like I said, the witness characters are just so boring. They're just like, something's wrong. I don't like the way this is being done, but I just want to fight. Like I said, I'm not a fan. I heard the second book is better, but I can't bring myself to read it just because there's just so many other books to read, and I just didn't enjoy this one enough to continue on. So I guess it's just not the book for me. And the next book I read is Faraway Wanderers by Priest. This is Priest's first novel, and Priest is like an author that's written many Chinese sci-fi and fantasy novels, and most of them are serialized online, and you can pay to access a chapter a week. This book came out, I think, in 2006. It's been a very long time. It's been out for a while, but it's just about these two characters who are just complete assholes, and that is why they get along so well with each other. One guy used to be like this big shot in the imperial court, and he since decided, I don't want to live this kind of life anymore. anymore. It's no fun torturing people, dealing with court politics. I don't want it. So he basically decides that like he is going to get out of it, and the only way to get out is to use this kind of martial arts technique on yourself where you drive like 7 nails into your body. And he does this like slowly over the course of several months, and it's supposed to incapacitate him. By the end of like 2 or 3 years, he's going to die, but at least he'll be allowed to live in great pain and agony throughout that time period. So he's decided that he's going to travel the world and visit the places that he never really got to visit before, because before he visited, but it was in a very like official capacity to like hunt down people, hunt down information, torture somebody, like all that stuff. And now he gets to just wander and drink and like meet up with old friends and just live a very normal life, and that's kind of what he wants. But too bad he only has like 2 or 3 years to do it. And on the way, like he runs into these other characters, including the other main character, who is this kind of like mysterious figure who is incredibly promiscuous, and he hits on him and everybody around them. The two main characters have great chemistry with each other. They are both kind of morally gray, and just the way that like their banter, the way they snark back and forth at each other, the way they just don't care about doing things the right way. Someone gets in their way, they're just like, well, I guess he's gonna go. And like they have this kind of obsession with collecting karma points, which I find hilarious because like I said, the protagonist is like, he used to live a life of sin, and now he's like, I'm going to make up for it before I go in 2 or 3 years by just doing some good deeds. But he always kind of like half-asses it or like fails part way through, and it's just funny. Like they made a drama adaptation called Word of Honor. I don't like that as much because I think due to Chinese censorship, they just cannot depict morally gray characters, and these two protagonists are both morally gray, so I don't know, I thought the characterization got completely butchered. But apparently others don't agree with me, because there are some people that have read the book and still enjoy the series a lot, so I don't know, maybe it works for other people. Strangely enough, despite the Chinese censorship, the romance in the series seems upped compared to the book, which is so weird because you're not supposed to be able to show any of that stuff. But the drama just seems a lot more romance and relationship oriented versus the book, which is, I don't know, I can't wrap my head around it. But yeah, like I did enjoy it, but like I didn't love it or anything. It was a kind of a messy book, but just because I had fun reading it, like I decided I gave it 3 stars in the end because I did like it. The next book I read was Pines by Blake Crouch, and I think they made a TV series out of this, but I don't know, like I read this because somebody said that it just has that kind of creepy town vibe that I like the creepy sci-fi-esque town. So like the main character is a Secret Service agent. He's sent to this town called Wayward Pines to investigate why 2 of his co-workers went missing, like 2 other Secret Service agents that got sent there beforehand for some other like top secret mission. So he gets there and things just go very, very wrong, and he's like, what the fuck is going on? But no one will tell him like what exactly is happening. Like he gets in a car accident and he wakes up, everything's missing. He's just in the hospital, no wallet, no identification. He wanders around like he has no money, and everyone he talks to is like, what accident? We didn't see an accident, but it's a small town. Like, and he crashed kind of in the middle of it, so everyone should have noticed what happened, but nobody does. And like the sheriff is holding on his possessions, and just everyone just seems off like in a very creepy kind of fashion. Like I don't know, like I had again theories. I'm like, are they AIs? Like, are they going to sacrifice him to some primordial being? Like what is happening? And he doesn't know what's happening either, and he's just trying to figure out like how he can get out of this town, get back to his wife and his family back in Seattle. But like the phone doesn't work, there doesn't seem to be internet, everyone seems stuck in like the 60s or something. Like people have like block parties and they're dressed in like, those nice dresses from the 50s and stuff like that. It's kind of Stepford Wives-ish and also Silent Hill-like. Those sound like 2 things that wouldn't really go together, but I think when you read it, you'll see what I mean. Like there's just something, it feels like someone experimented somewhere and fucked up. And so it's not a long book, so you can probably get through it pretty fast. Like I read it like I think in 1 sitting, just because it was so just a quick read. Like I'm like, I want to know what's going to happen next. It's very violent. I can't say there's great amounts of character development, just because most of the story is just devoted to like the action, like the escape. And then at the end, there's this very quick reveal, like, here's what's going on. And this is what I had a bit of a problem with. I'm like, it could have been done better, I think. Part of the concept is shocking to me. Like, there's certain things I liked about it, certain things I didn't. And I know this is only like the first book in, I think, a trilogy, so there are several more that I can read, and maybe it'll fill in some of the gaps more and like explain things a bit better. But for now, I'm just like, I did, again, enjoy it, but it wasn't a great read or anything like that. And then the next book I read, I actually read this throughout the month of May as part of our Discord book club. So we read like a chunk of chapters every week. So the book is The Forest of Stolen Girls by Joan Hur. Like, I cannot pronounce her last name. Sorry. Yeah, I will put it there so you can see, because I butcher all names, as you know. But basically, this is a story set in the Joseon period of Korea. So I think it's from the late 1300s all the way to like the 1800s. And it was when Korea was a vassal state to first one of the Mongolian dynasties in China, and then later on to the Ming dynasty. And when you're a vassal state, like Vietnam was also a vassal state at one point, so like you would have to send tribute, and like, including all the nice expensive stuff you find, like your treasures, like beautiful women, all that stuff. So the protagonist of this book is this young woman whose father is like this famous detective in the kingdom, and he has disappeared. So she's gone to Jeju Island, where her younger sister is based, and is, I guess, apprenticed to like a shaman lady there. And she said this is the last place her father was seen, and so she decides to go there to figure out what happened to him, and also kind of like complete his investigation, because before he died, he was investigating the disappearances of these 13 girls and women. And I believe they found the body of one of them, and the rest of them are just unaccounted for. So, what happened? Is her father dead? Who is involved? What's going on? Again, it's a mystery, but a historical Korean one, which is very interesting. Never seen that done before, except, I think I saw there was a K-drama where they kind of like went with that angle, but I believe that had more of like a capital city palace focus, whereas this is set on Jeju Island, which is at this point in time, at least, like it's not the tourist destination that it is now. It's like, it was more wild and windy, life was rough and harder there. So the women, worked alongside with the men, like they weren't like hidden away as they were in like other places. And just like most of the other books on my list, there's a lot of social commentary in here. Like the usual suspects are all present, like injustice and wealth gaps and patriarchy and all of those things. What I really liked about this, though, is that even though it's a historical novel, the female characters have a lot of agency, and they are really the focus of the novel. All the male characters play a supporting role to them pretty much. The most important relationships in the novel are the ones between the protagonist and her sister, and the sisters and their father. And just like the other various father-daughter and mother-daughter relationships around this village, so there's really no romance or anything like that. It's just all these family relationships, the way that a community like that interacts with each other, and just like the reality of life as part of a vassal state, especially life as a woman in a vassal state. The last book that I did finish for May was Crying in H Mart by Michelle Zauner. And Michelle Zauner is also known as Japanese Breakfast. That's an indie band. I think that like that genre is called dream pop, shoegaze, something like that. I'm going to link to the song that I like most from them that I listened to while I was reading this book. And Michelle Zauner originally wrote this essay for The New Yorker. I'm going to link to that as well. It was about her grieving for her mother after her mother passed away from cancer when she was 25 years old, and just being in H Mart and like remembering her childhood and the dishes that her mother, her aunts, and her grandmother used to cook for her, because Michelle Zauner is half Korean and half white. So her father is from the United States and her mother is from Korea. And they met when he was working abroad over there, and they decided to move to, I think, Eugene, Oregon. So they live in a mostly like predominantly white community. So she kind of talks about not being able to fit in on either side of her ethnic backgrounds. She doesn't feel like she's white because white people always ask her, what are you? Like, are you Chinese? Are you Japanese? And then other Koreans don't fully accept her because they can't really tell like, exactly she is either, and like she's not Korean enough most of the time. But that's just a small part of the book, because most of it is about her and her mother's relationship, and it was not a perfect one. They had a lot of ups and downs. They fought a lot. They were very different people, and her mother felt like she was ungrateful. She felt like her mother didn't understand her. There was a kind of like a barrier and like an inability to really like fully understand each other. It does get better as she gets older and goes to college and everything, but of course that's when her mother gets her cancer diagnosis. So a good chunk of the book is devoted to just her taking care of her mother as she's going through chemotherapy, and then watching as her mother dies, and learning the recipes that her mother enjoyed, and just finding Korean recipes that her mother can actually eat because like she's having trouble like keeping down food and all that stuff, and just connecting to her Korean roots through food. And it's very weird because I started this book, I did a buddy read of the article Crying in H Mart with the other feasting girls that I have done some live shows with, Kim, Amrita, and Rosie. I'm going to link their channels below. But basically we did a talk about the article and just food and what it means for us and like our childhood, our culture, families, so on and so forth. So for that, both Kim and I read this book. You know, I didn't finish it until like after we did the show, but I think I started it, and it was like the night before, like we got this phone call from like my grandfather's nursing home saying that they thought he was going to go because he was not eating or drinking anymore. And there was this point in the book where just like, I think it happened like right after like I got that news that she was saying that her mother was just not eating or drinking, and she was afraid that her mother was going to starve to death. And we definitely had that concern for my grandfather as well, even though he wasn't dying of cancer. He was just going because of old age. And so because he'd lived such a long and full life, and he was just passing relatively peacefully, it was not as horrible as the experience that Michelle Donner went through. But I thought it was relatable for me, at least at this point in my life, because like I haven't really experienced deaths of like family members like close to me before, and like my grandfather and I, like we had this connection. He was somebody that really understood me, and like I don't know, we got each other in this way that I cannot really voice. I don't know how to explain it even to like my family. I can't even tell my mom like, okay, well, this is the connection, like it's just there. I don't think he knew how to express it either, but you know, like I definitely felt that. So when I was reading this book, I had these moments where I was just like for example, she would talk about going to the fish market and remembering her mom and her aunts buying seafood there. And I definitely had those memories before. Like I remember like when I go to like buy chicken chips, which are like basically fries with this chicken salt on it in Sydney. Like I remember like how my grandfather used to buy chicken chips for me and my sister at like the butcher shop across the way from his house. And just like those things like that, like I feel like I have most of those memories like really associated with food. So I totally get what Michelle Donner is talking about. Just like there are some dishes that you just will always associate with a certain moment, a time in your life, like a person. Overall, this book was a rough read, but it was also kind of cathartic. At least that's how I felt about it. Like, I don't know how it's going to be for everybody else. Depending on, like I said, where you are in your life or what's going on with you, you might not want to read it, or you might not be able to relate to it. But for me, it just came along at the perfect time, in my opinion. So I loved it a lot, and I'm glad that it ended with Michelle being able to find like some kind of closure, because I think that's just very important in order to, you know, move on from like these sad experiences in our lives. Okay, that was a tragic note to end on, but like that was really the last book I finished in May. So I am going to end the video right there, and I hope that you join me for the readathon in June. I know many of you have your own readathons going on already, so I'm actually kind of excited to see what everyone else is doing. But I am, like I said, ready to start this thing. So yeah, thanks for watching, and see you next time. Bye.